Hey everyone. Let me figure out if it's better to turn the light on. Hold on. Ooh, that is not better. Ooh. I rearranged the living room this week, and so the lighting's a little different, but it's okay. Welcome to our Platica of the week. I hope you got a chance to read our article. If not, that's okay. I'm sure, my long-winded self will catch you up on what we read this week. Feel free to engage with us. Let me know what you think. This is kind of our community portion of the Platica of the week. Our article this week, what anti-racist teachers do differently. It was an article out of the Atlantic by the first Black principal of, let me see where she worked, of somewhere. Because the way that my printer prints is like this. So someone help, because it's a waste of paper. This article printed off really weirdly. But what anti-racist teachers do differently, I probably learned the most from this article that I've learned from pretty much, I learned from all articles, But this article, I had read it online. I had to take notes on it. Like it was legit. So the author here is coming from the lens of being a Black educator and teaching a majority of Black students. And so that's kind of the lens of this article, which is okay because it lends to teaching. I think a lot of what she said lends to teaching students of color, Indigenous students, BIPOC. And so the subtitle does say that anti-racist teachers view the success of Black students as central to the success of their own teaching. I love this article because she goes into very little bit of historical things, but mostly like this is what you can do, and these are these little tidbits. And so even though it might not be simple for everyone, I think it just kind of gives us educators an opportunity to at least start to manipulate or change a couple of things in our classrooms in order to be more anti-racist. What's up, Edgar? How are you today? Happy Friday. Happy Friday to everybody. So the first kind of tidbit I took away from the article was that anti-racist teachers take Black students seriously. This seems so simple, right? Like just take your students seriously. But Elizabeth in our Ask an Educator series yesterday, our session yesterday, really brought up a good point, which is that a lot of times we as educators are like, I'm the authority figure here. I'm all knowing. And so you need to listen to what I have to say. And that's the really detrimental part about being a white savior educator as well, because it sends off the message that I have something that you don't have that I'm getting ready to give you, and it's better than anything that you bring to the table, which is just not true, right? Of course, we have resources, networks, knowledge that we're going to provide to our students, but they also bring so much to the table as well. I love that this article centered around that, around how students have so much to offer the classroom and offer schools. And the next thing that kind of stuck out to me in this article, I had read it online, so I have notes, and so I got to find the place in the article, but anti-racist teachers identify with Black students who are struggling. This kind of came out to me, or stuck out to me, because I think we as educators and we as teachers, I'll speak for myself, when students are struggling we try to find reasons for why that's happening that are disconnected from what we can control, like he's always coming to school late, or all he thinks about is video games, or there's so much going on at home, right? And so those are very real elements of our students' lives. But the way this article and her frame of thinking is kind of positioned is that there's so much that we can do. The next thing that stuck out to me that really, I'm like, okay, that's on the to-do list. Examine cultural differences in discourse styles. This in particular, I think is really important, especially because all of us who have been educated in the United States, all of our lives, have this very white normative structure for assessment and structure for the English language norms, mathematical norms. It's very Eurocentric, right? And so you have to examine the cultural differences in discourse styles in order to not dismiss our students as just completely wrong right off the bat. I've recently read about Ebonics and how it shouldn't just be considered a dialect, or I'm sorry, it shouldn't just be considered like wrong English, but really a dialect of English. And so we have to evaluate the way that we're assessing our kids. That's my puppy. Are we evaluating based on the white normative standards that we were raised on and that we're expected to assess on? Or are we, as anti-racist teachers, standing up for our kids and advocating for our kids and pushing back against this white normative structure, right? Another important thing that came out in the article for me, I love this article because it's just like to-do list. That's kind of how my mind works. So integrate oral language into the curriculum. So students, I have my master's in teaching English as a second language, and their modes of communication, whatever they choose for that to be, is like the way they're going to learn the most. The way they're going to learn to talk the most and opinionate the most is through talking and listening. And so integrating oral language into the curriculum, I hate that this article printed like this because I can't find where I'm at. But integrating oral language would mean that our students get the opportunity. Here we go. We learn how to integrate oral language into our curriculum. So adding debate, adding poetry recitation to provide students ample opportunities to work together. I'll speak for myself. I know that in my community as a Latina, we come from, people who talk a lot, or don't talk a lot, but, communicate in ways that should be examined and integrated into our classrooms. I like that the author said that nothing goes without saying. Our students, especially our students who are learning how to be a part of a school system, want to be included. And so whatever it is that we need to do in order to make that happen, that's our responsibility as educators. The next part, some of us might not like or feel comfortable with right now. Use evidence in your classrooms as ways to improve. So what is that evidence? Number one, I like how she said that we should disaggregate data by ethnicity. It's not something I ever did. And I don't think her intentions is that we should do it in like a public forum or anything like that. But disaggregating data by ethnicity would give us the opportunity to look for patterns and problematize our own practice. So anti-racist teachers evaluate their teaching through data and here specifically by ethnicity. I know that I've in the past, I've noticed patterns in my teaching where perhaps my boys were doing better than my girls were doing better than my boys. I wish I would have been better so far at disaggregating data by ethnicity and by background. I think the benefits in this would be that you realize if there are patterns in your assessing that are problematic to the outcomes of your students. So patterns, especially in data, are really complicated when in education, because you want to make sure that when you're looking at them, it's not with a lens of like you're being hard on yourself, but really it's like, okay, if I'm noticing that more of my Black students are struggling with this unit or struggling with this standard, is it the way that I am assessing those Black students that's a problem? The answer could be no, right? But something that the author then brings up next is like, no educator is there, like at the peak of like your educational journey, because just like being anti-racist, being an educator is a journey, being the best educator we can be, because things change, students change, curriculums change, schools change. And so seeking support, she suggests seeking support from colleagues and effective teachers. So perhaps using that data, or laying out that data, analyzing it on your own, and then bringing it to your colleagues and saying, hey, what do you think about this data? Of course, that would mean finding another educator that's on their path to being anti-racist, because I think many people would look at that data and feel offended. And so it might be a stretch for some of us. Please stop. Thank you. So yeah, I really I pulled out this quote where she said that teachers who do not value Black students, will shift the discussion away from their own practice when they see that Black students are not succeeding in their classes. I was like, ooh, okay. And I think that's true. I mean, like I said, we're going to say, oh, those students are late, or those students don't eat breakfast, or right, which are very real elements of our students' lives, and they often do make an impact on their educational outcomes and performance. But teachers who do not value Black students, so either they're functioning under implicit bias, or they're just straight up not anti-racist, so racist, are going to shift the discussion away from what I am as a teacher am doing wrong, because it's easier for me to say, you know what, this student is a lost cause. It has nothing to do with me, than to say, hey, it's my responsibility for every student in this classroom to learn, and to learn well. And so that's my responsibility. But that stuck out to me. I was like, okay, girl, the people who don't value Black students will shift the discussion away from their own practice. Whew. All right, so recognizing and feeding students power. I think this is something that that gets lost in education. Things get busy, things get stressful. You have behavioral issues, you have, fire drills, you have field trips, you have parent-teacher conferences. Things get crazy, and that's something I know very well. But feeling, recognizing, and analyzing to understand our students' power, to put them into positions in our culture and in the culture of our classroom, so that they can be fed, their power can be fed. This is something that the author says anti-racist teachers do. I like that she said that Black students have honoring their many contributions to our schools. Those contributions can look differently. They might make us feel uncomfortable. Honestly, I know I've had students in the past. I can think of one student in particular who was very hesitant to my teaching. And I told him he was right. I was like, I pulled him to the side one day and I was like, you're right. Like, this is not very fun. It was maybe my first or second year teaching, so I'm sure I wasn't doing my best. And we just had a conversation about how, like, his power shined through. Like, I was like, I feel you, Now, to get past that and say, okay, I've evaluated that this isn't working for that student, and so now I need to make a change. I think that's where we take the next step, right? So consistently revealing and examining our own practice and seeking input from Black stakeholders. They must invite Black parents to the table, listen to their concerns and ideas, and act on them. I had a webinar this week with IUE, the Institute for Urban Education. Shout out to UMKC. And we were talking about how to have the school or district be okay with texts that aren't approved by the district, right? But that we know perhaps our students need to have access to, whether it's because there are predominantly Black characters in the books, whether it's because it's showing more parts of history than just a Eurocentric that we're used to. And one of the things I thought about or that I mentioned was get your students' parents on board. Get their suggestions about books that they know of that made a good impact on their lives or that they read at home that make good impacts on their students' lives. Ultimately, the school system should be there to serve students and their families. I think we unfortunately, that's not our main focus a lot of times. Like I said, things get busy, things get crazy. The state requires this, federal requires this, local requires, things get crazy. But if we want to be able to show up for our students and do what this article says and be anti-racist teachers, I think part of that, I'm not going to say I think, I know part of that is going to be to involve our families in the community and seek their input and seek their support. So I like that the author included that. So seeking input from Black stakeholders, that goes the same for Latinx families and seeking their input. Seeking the input from families of students with disabilities, seeking the input of students or families of students who are learning English. How do your children learn best? Okay, lastly, the author kind of breaks it down to like principals, here's what you can do. District administration, here's what you can do. And school board, here's what you can do. So I'll start off with principals. I think most of the article was directed at teachers. And so now administration, right? So principals, they must clearly and consistently communicate the anti-racist vision for their school, create professional development opportunities for staff, recognize teachers who successfully teach all of their students, and intervene when they see problems. So principals, administrators on the school level, it's your responsibility, right? To communicate that anti-racist vision, and then recognize teachers who are doing it well, and intervene when things are happening that don't align with that. That takes principals as seeing their students first, and seeing that as a priority, because I can imagine that it would be difficult to say, hey, you're not aligning with our vision, and so let's talk about that. That's a difficult conversation to have, but if our students are at the forefront of everything that we do, including teachers, I think that it makes it a simpler conversation. Secondly, district administration. District level administrators must more firmly root their anti-racist messaging in Black student school experiences, making expectations for educators clear. I think that this is a little bit of a conversation that school districts struggle to have, because some of us are still afraid of mentioning race in our students when really it has to be a part of our anti-racist vision. And they must more firmly root their anti-racist messaging in Black students' school experiences. You know what that means? That means that we have to gather Black student experiences, meaning we have to ask for feedback from our Black students, from our Latinx students, from our ELL students, from our refugee students, and disaggregate that data and say what are the holes in our system here? What are the issues in our system here? That's not easy to do. I can imagine, especially because some of us struggle having feedback, period. But our students are who we are serving, and so that should be at the forefront, again, of how we become better. Lastly, school board members. You know, as a teacher, I probably never considered, like, how does the school board fit into this? Can I reach out to them? Can I talk to them? What, you know, it just feels like really distant. But this article lists that school board members need to listen to educators who have shown efficacy in educating Black students. In my experience, when I as a teacher had efficacy in teaching all my students or a particular group of students, I feel like it came with some resistance of, like, I don't know what it was about. I'm still kind of feeling through that and healing through that, but that stuck out to me. Listen to educators who have shown efficacy in educating Black students. Educators are doing this work successfully. They are teaching Black students successfully, ELL students successfully, and not just successfully, like excelling at it. We have great, amazing teachers and students in our districts that are really doing great work. And so school board members should be reaching out to understand what those educators are doing differently or the same that help them find efficacy in the success of their Black, Latinx, ELL, SPED, refugee, immigrant students, Indigenous students. The school board members must enact policies that hold us all accountable to our Black families, to our Latinx families, to our ELL families, to our refugee families. That policy work is really fascinating to me, and I don't think we focus on it enough. Lastly, we must make demands of ourselves and work together in our communities. The only measure of our anti-racist teaching. So if none of that caught your eye, the only measure of our anti-racist teaching will be the academic success of all of our students, including our Black students. That's where that ends, the article ends. Including our Latinx students, including our ELL students, including our Indigenous students, including our students who identify with LGBTQIA. So all of our students, that's the measure. Is the day we can say all of our students are equally successful. That's the day we can say every teacher here now is anti-racist. As of right now, that's not happening. If I can imagine, or really, like, I know that it would be difficult to look at my data and say, wow, my Black students are not achieving as well as my other students. That's a harsh reality as an educator, because we all, for the most part, that every educator I've ever met means well. We have to consider intent versus impact, though. What are your intentions? Well, how do you show up to the table? How do you show up to the classroom? And what are your intentions there? But then what is the impact? I hope that this year I can really take a look at some data and break it down by ethnicity, break it down by gender. Understand, is there something that we're doing that is not anti-racist, meaning, or so Ibram Kendi says that those that are not anti-racist are racist. Now, being anti-racist and being an anti-racist educator is a journey. So I hope you enjoyed our article this week. If you haven't gotten a chance to read it, please do. I wrote down so many notes because I'm actually going to evaluate it a little bit more and see how does this directly relate to lesson planning. I know there's some of that work happening right now, and so I'm going to be doing some of that research, but what anti-racist teachers do differently. Let me know what you think, what you thought about it. Check us out on Monday as I'm going to release a new article for our Platica of the Week. Tuesday, I'll be on IG Live to let you know what I think. And then Fridays, join us for the Community Platica so then you can tell me what you think. I hope everyone has a great weekend. Happy Friday. It's a nice day outside. Have a good weekend, everyone. Bye.